special meeting for the airport commission. Couple of housekeeping items that any questions from any of the commissioners, please call. When the presentation is done. And at this time, I will call the meeting to order and request Commissioner Payne to lead us to the pledge of allegiance.
Thank you very much. Somebody give me the first ones. I do this at school and I goes out of my head. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Payne. Before we start, we have pressure.
Don't ask me to speak up.
Okay, we need to keep the talk down, please.
Recognize our interim city manager, Teresa.
Okay, those.
Christina, the agenda has been posted.
Yes, Chairman Data has been posted.
Can we start the roll call?
Yes. For those commissioners on Zoom, can everyone hear me? And can you please unmute your mics at this time?
Yeah.
Commissioner Adams, Breslin, present. Badillo,
President.
Burke is, sorry. Burke, sorry. Corcoran,
President.
Dada,
Here.
Feltman,
Yes.
Hedrick,
Present.
Hughes is excused. Martin. Michaelis,
Present.
Miller,
Here.
Kane,
Present.
Hyde. Here. Schmidt,
Here.
Slama,
Here.
Suero. And Whiteman. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. At this time, I will entertain a motion from the commissioner for the acceptance of the agenda. So second, there'll be a motion and a second, any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? If none, at this time, we will open up public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes on any subject within the purview of the commission. Christina, do we have anyone that would like to speak at this time?
Yes, sir. We have Salvador Amzakita. Salvador, you can come over here in front of the mic so they can hear you on Zoom. Come on over. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
I'll make it brief. I'm Salvador Mezquita. I'm here representing the Carpenters Local 951. We represent the entire Riverside County. And we're just excited if you guys are gonna expand, renovate, if there's any, work for us. I brought a handful of local members. Willing for whatever you got for us.
Thank you, Salvador, for your comments. Christina, anyone else?
One moment, we have people on Zoom. Anyone on Zoom, if you're not speaking, please mute your mics, please. Okay, Gary Wexler, you may now mute yourself and speak.
Thank you. Hello to the commission members. I want to thank you for last month allowing me to share with you a history of the Wexler designed airport terminal. And I'm glad today to be talking to specifically the master plan subcommittee and the consulting team. I was very pleased to read yesterday the announcement in Flying SoCal of your planned relationship with the Historic Site Preservation Board, and to quote, preserving the original Don Wexler design and restoring, staying true to the historic building. We all understand the economic benefit of architectural tourism. In that regard, I just want to say that the value of the Wexler terminal from 1966, it increases with age. Preserving the original Don Wexler design, this includes not just the Class 1 protected west facade, but also with the current National Registry designation, it sets guidelines for the interior and the landscaping. And at this moment in time, I believe our historic airport terminal is the most important city-owned asset. So with the master plan subcommittee and Mead and Hunt, if additions or a new terminal is in our city's future, let's set our sights high. A world-class building and world-renowned architecture firm would be the way to honor the integrity of our city's rich architectural history. Lastly, we have a community filled with expertise regarding buildings of this type of landscape design appropriate for the restoration. Please ask Christina for my personal contact information. I'd be very happy and honored to provide you with contacts of people which can help guide you through this process with our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Anyone else?
One moment, please. Tom Doyle, you may now unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to speak. To build on what Gary Wexler said, in reading over the previous airport master plan, I couldn't find the words design or architecture or visual experience used as criteria for any planning, goals, or decision-making. Palm Springs is known the world over for its first-class architecture, both private and civic. Most of this was built in the 1950s to the 1970s and has stood the test of time. Our own original airport terminal is a Class 1 historic structure by resident architect Donald Wexler. The region gets a tremendous financial benefit by hosting Modernism Week and other design and architecture-oriented events, which attract visitors from across the globe who come here because of our unique architectural heritage. It is essential that the words design, architecture, and visual experience are included as goals and objectives in the master plan. And we expect high-quality results, not cookie-cutter budget solutions. It should state clearly that the restoration of the Wexler terminal is non-negotiable, and modern additions maintain a high level of architectural integrity. We are fortunate to have a large creative class of residents with illustrious careers and expertise in the fields of design and architecture. Including them in the process will assure that the Palm Springs Airport continues to be the unique experience that visitors and residents expect, and a world-class piece of architecture and design that represents the personality of Palm Springs. The financial well-being of the entire valley depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. One moment. Jade Nelson, you may now unmute yourself and speak.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jade Nelson, and I'm a Palm Springs native and a longtime resident for 40 plus years. I can remember going to the airport for the first time as a child and many, many times since. And up until about 15 years ago, loving the original design of the facility with this easy breezy, wonderful feeling. And that was a feeling that was conveyed to me over many, many decades, the last 3-4 decades, by visitors, travelers that I deal with on a daily basis in my historic preservation and walking tour business, as well as my former business as a hotel manager here in town. And I've heard over the last decade, many people saying that it's unfortunate that carpet has been added over the terrazzo and original architectural details have been covered up, and outside benches and seating and landscaping have been altered to the point that it doesn't feel like that wonderful, easy breezy Palm Springs Airport. Given that it's become an international airport and the town has grown, all of that is understandable, but we have this golden opportunity to bring it back to that wonderful feeling, especially on the heels of Modernism Week, which has proven to be one of the huge economic drivers of the area
and has brought hundreds of thousands of visitors to the Coachella Valley and Palm Springs over many, many years, who are wondering why that airport doesn't evoke its original early 60s feeling by Donald Wexler, one of our important master architects. And being that it is on the National Register of Historic Places, this building does deserve that proper restoration, attention, love, and care. I would just quickly point out that the Gerald R. Ford Airport in Michigan and also Phoenix Sky Harbor have done wonderful things with their terrazzo and have even had local competition of various designers and artists to create patterns within the terrazzo. And I think we have that opportunity here, if not to restore it to the original terrazzo look. Lastly, preservation
Jake,
matters.
that's 3 minutes. Can you wrap it up, please?
That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand at this time. Chairman Dodd, I do not believe we have any more public speakers today.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
is that okay if I?
Absolutely. Please announce your name.
Yeah, my name is Julian Sanchez. I work with Enterprise Rent-A-Car and our property development team. And I'm excited about this new master plan and how that's going to impact the rental car footprint here at the Palm Springs Airport.
Thank you. Or anyone else in the room that did not turn in a speaker card that would like to speak? I believe that concludes public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your comment, and at this time, I would like to close public comment. We move on now to our main master plan presentation, so Harry, we will let you introduce the folks that will make the presentation.
Absolutely. A lot of people in this room, so apparently a lot of interest in the airport. For those of you who don't know me, oh, we did.
Go ahead.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Harry Barrett. I'm the executive director of the airport. And sit around the table is the airport commission. Their job is to help advise and form the future of the airport. So they do great work. I appreciate them for being here. I appreciate your interest in being here. Obviously, Palm Springs is growing and it's touching every part of the facility. We're having challenges in the terminal, challenges with parking, challenges on the airfield, challenges with general aviation. And the plan here is to fix those challenges. And for an airport director, this is the fun stuff. This is the stuff that we get excited about because we get to create and we get to come up with new ideas. So that's the context for what we're doing here today. Back in September, the commission met, we had a strategy session to just start generating those ideas, what we wanted the future of PSP to be. And just to summarize some of those things, we discussed the funding mechanism for how we did projects and what those agreements look like with our rental car companies, with our airlines, our user fees, things like that. We discussed that we need to be more creative and innovative going into the future. We talked about customer experience. We talked about maintaining the facilities and which facilities to keep and what needs to move. We also talked about improving safety. That's a huge one for aviation, is making sure that the aviation system is safe. And ultimately what that culminated in is what would we look like in the year 2042, so 20 years from now. So with me to my left is Ryan Hayes. He's with Mead and Hunt. Mead and Hunt was the consultant selected to help lead the master plan. And on the line, I believe, is Katie from Aviatrix, and she is responsible for outreach. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to give his presentation, and we will go from there.
Thank you, Harry. Christina, so I can share. So, good afternoon, everyone.
Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Can someone let us know if you can see the PowerPoint on Zoom, please?
Yes, we can.
All good.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. We are really excited to finally be underway and working on this project. As Harry mentioned, we were selected in October. We spent a couple of months working really closely with airport staff to develop a scope for the project. And I shared a little bit about what the the planning process and the schedule looks like at your last meeting in January, and I've got those same slides here today, so it'll be a little bit repetitive, but I've got some additional information that I want to share with you all about kind of what conceptual planning and a master plan process looks like to get you all thinking conceptually. I guess before I start, I neglected in January to give a thank you to Victoria. So Victoria was our main point of contact through the scoping process. Obviously, we coordinated with Harry a lot as well, but Victoria answered every email, every phone call, and also helped us coordinate this scope with the FAA. So I just want to thank you for all the work. It was much appreciated. So our agenda for this slideshow is to reintroduce ourselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a master plan is, what it's not, and why it's needed. I'll go over again those slides that I showed you in January that outline the planning process as well as the planning schedule. And then I really want you all to hear from Katie about our scope, our ideas, our plans for public outreach in this planning process. And so I'll let Katie talk a little bit about that. Reintroducing ourselves, as Harry said, I'm Ryan Hayes with Mead and Hunt. My associate Matt Nesbitt is also here. We have two members of our sub-consultant team, Katie on Zoom, and Katie, is Kim on Zoom too?
She's on Zoom, but unfortunately, we came down with COVID and she is off the video.
But I'm on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Kim. Thank you for joining us, Katie. And then we also have Neil McLean from Gensler, and we were really excited to be partnered with Gensler on this project. Gensler has a long history of architectural work for this airport. We do have 6 other specialty sub-consultant firms on the project. Some of the roles and responsibilities of those firms include a boundary survey. We're going to survey the entire airport. We've got some budget to do some property research and make sure we clear up any discrepancies on where property lines are, fence lines, that type of thing. We have a firm who's going to do an aerial survey. As those of you in the room can see the aerial photo on the wall here. We're going to get a new version of that to hang around in the airport, and that's also going to serve for our purposes of base mapping for the master plan. We have some firms helping with terminal planning and programming space, a firm that specializes in vehicle parking and parking structures. We also have a firm who's going to help us with forecasts and financial analysis, and then finally a firm that specializes in California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA requirements. So that's the roles of the other subs that make up the team. So just a little bit about what this is and why we're doing it. And again, we went over this in January, so I'll go fast, but we can certainly back up if you need to. At its heart, the master plan is a decision-making tool for the city as the sponsor of this airport that will guide orderly development of future airport facilities. It informs management and operating policies for the airport. It develops a layout of airport facilities. It identifies space for future airport development. If you're not familiar, the FAA pays for approximately 90% of this project. And the reason that master planning is eligible for FAA funds is it provides the FAA with a couple of things. It tells them what Harry and his team are thinking in terms of future projects and allows them to start programming funding to help support those projects. It also shows the FAA that the airport is laid out in a way that meets their standards. So the FAA has design standards that fit all airports around the country. And one of the strings that comes with their money is they want you to meet their standards. So that's a big goal of the master plan process, is to look at areas where the airport may not be in compliance with FAA standards and make recommendations to get into compliance. The planning process also includes some environmental review for the purposes of CEQA and NEPA. CEQA being the California Environmental Quality Act and NEPA being the National Environmental Policy Act. And then finally, the document, the final master plan document is very useful to city and county planners as well as they do land use planning for the entire valley, as they do regional transportation planning. So the idea is to make a planning document that fits with those other local planning documents. Any questions about what a master plan is? Any of those bullets? If not, a couple of things that a master plan is not. So it's not a business plan per se. So the FAA considers it a airport responsibility to do business planning in terms of revenue development and setting revenue goals and typical business planning practices. That said, we are going to do a financial implementation analysis to figure out how we're going to align funding sources with capital project needs. So there's a bit of finance work that's included in the master plan, but it's not a business plan per se, if that makes sense. It's also not a marketing plan. The FAA considers marketing a local responsibility of the airport sponsor to market air service and market the airport. And it's not a noise study, but again, this is a subject that we will touch on. We will develop new noise contours as part of the CEQA analysis. So we take the forecast of activity and the fleet mix, and we put all that into a model, and the model gives us noise contours, which are essentially like a topographic contour map, connects points of equal noise around the airport. So we will look at the recommendations of the master plan and how they might either negatively impact the surrounding community or have potential positive impacts from a noise standpoint. So those are just a couple of points I want to clarify about what a master plan is not. Really what the process is, it's a physical development plan for Palm Springs International Airport that reserves space for potentially needed facilities. There's a whole lot of reasons why we're doing this. The last master plan process was completed in 2015. The FAA recommends that airports at least every 7 to 10 years undergo a planning process like this. And they will even consider funding planning processes sooner than 7 years if things change significantly. For instance, an airport attracts international service that didn't have international service, that might be a major change that would necessitate a new master plan. Obviously, level of service is going to be very, very important, particularly on the terminal side as we analyze parking, vehicle circulation, all of the spaces and the processors within the terminal. We're going to quantify things like queuing times and space requirements for each of the functional areas of the terminal building. So passenger level of service, enhancing the passenger experience is going to be a big component. Christina got a handful of public comments already coming in today, and quite a few of those touched on the passenger experience, I believe. So that's another reason why we're doing this. There's also just been a lot of it. Quite frankly, the aviation industry is very dynamic. Things are changing all the time and they change fast. And a lot of things have happened since 2015. There have been fleet mix changes in the industry. Before the pandemic, the airlines were already upgauging aircraft, moving away from regional jets and towards mainline narrow body aircraft, and the pandemic has just accelerated that transition. That's why here at Palm Springs, you see a lot of narrow body aircraft parked at the regional jet terminal, because that transition is happening faster than the airport has been able to get ahead of it, if you will. The potential for international flights is another reason. Parking and rental cars and TNC, lots of changes on the land side of airports. Lots of new trends that we want to, again, try to get ahead of. And then finally, the airport also serves an active general aviation community, a couple of FBOs. FBO, if you're not familiar, stands for a fixed base operator. These are businesses that provide services like fueling and catering to general aviation aircraft. So that's as best as we can summarize why we're doing this, but it's a long list, obviously. I showed you this chart in January as well. These are various forecast scenarios that were developed in the last master plan. Each one of those colored lines on the chart is a different scenario. The star that I added to the chart is where the airport is today at about 1.5 million annual passenger, 1.5 million annual enplanements. So if you double that number for enplanements and deplanements, the airport processed just short of 3 million passengers in calendar year 2022. That was an all-time record, exceeding even pre-pandemic levels. And you can see that that was higher than any of the scenarios even contemplated in the last master plan. So the bottom line is things are growing faster than planners and airport staff and airport commission folks anticipated in the previous planning process. And I've said it multiple times already today, the goal is to try to get ahead of that growth. The annual numbers are important, but what's also important for our terminal planning purposes is the peak hour number. So airlines, the airport has limited ways to tell the airlines what time of day they fly. So airlines decide when they need to get flights into their hubs and when they need to hit certain banks at certain airports, and they schedule flights when they think it's going to work best for them. When the airlines all schedule flights at the same hour, that peak hour demand is where the terminal really becomes most stressed and where the level of service for the passengers drops to its lowest, if that makes sense. So there'll be a big focus on the peak hour, on those kind of peaking trends, and then obviously the seasonality of this airport also contributes to that peaking. We have some of our terminal planners that are coming out in March, and they've been working with Jeremy to identify some of the busiest days that are coming up in March. And it looks like there's some days, Jeremy, that potentially in March, there could be up to 2,000 passengers going through the security checkpoint in 1 hour. So we're going to have some folks here observing the queues on those days and making observations, timing things, trying to get some data that will inform the master plan process. But that, again, those peaking characteristics very much drive the terminal planning process. These are just some of the busy airport photos, long queuing lines. These are not, I'm sure you all have seen it busier than this. These are just the photos that I had available from, I think these were in October. A couple other key planning considerations that I just wanted to mention: public and stakeholder outreach, which Katie's going to talk about in more detail. We're also going to do an analysis of the air service situation. We're going to do a passenger demand analysis as well as a true visitation analysis, given the resort nature of the community. The aerial survey process doesn't just get us a new aerial of the airport, it gets us some significant data that can be fed into a GIS, a geographical information system. It gives us elevation data down to like what, Matt, like a half a foot. So really good data for estimating the cost of projects. And that's a big component. Obviously terminal space programming and terminal alternatives are important, and then figuring out how to pay for all of these projects is a key planning consideration. Harry and airport staff have organized a working group that includes, I believe, 4 members of the commission. Do you want to say anything about the working group and their role?
Yeah, so the idea behind the working group is to be kind of a sounding board for the consultants to feed and inform their work so that we can make the best decisions possible. So what we've done is we've created a working group of 11 individuals, 4 of them from the Airport Commission. I believe Chair Dada and Vice Chair Corcoran are on that, as well as Commissioner Hendrick and Commissioner Miller. Airport staff, who's most familiar with operational environment, and then other city staff for the purposes of ensuring the planning is consistent with city goals. So on the line, I believe we have Joel Montalvo, who's our city engineer, as well as Lindsay Page, who's with our sustainability office, and then perhaps Larry's on the line, I'm not sure, but he's with our IT department. Together, that group is going to work with Mead and Hunt and with the sub-consultants to help form this master plan process.
So essentially what we'll be doing is preparing draft chapters of the airport master plan. We'll send them to this group, you know, at least a week in advance of a meeting, ask them to review and be ready to discuss the material, and then we'll come and have a meeting, talk about it. Like Harry said, they really are, the intent is to have the working group be a sounding board to the consultant team, a sounding board to airport staff. When we do public open houses, public outreach events, you all that are working group members are absolutely invited. You are, if you want to be identified as a working group member for the airport master plan, we'd be happy to make name tags that indicate as such, but we don't want to pressure anybody to do anything if you don't want to be identified as part of this group. But you are more than welcome at all of the public outreach events that Katie's going to talk about. I showed a couple slides to you in January as well that just looked at the concept from the last master plan, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here other than to note that if you look at the 2 concourses, both the Sunny Bono concourse and the regional jet concourse on this map, again, with the growth being underestimated in the last planning process, there was a determination made that no additional gates were necessary at this airport. You all have probably seen aircraft parked all over this ramp, and that has changed now. And again, it's back to that peak hour discussion that I was talking about earlier. When the airlines all schedule the flights at the same time, then we run out of gates. And so it's probably a combination of the previous master plan underestimating the growth, but also just changes in the airline industry and how airline schedulers and dispatchers set up flight times that has contributed to this. But the bottom line is there is not a plan on the airport's current ALP to add more gates. And that's just one component of the terminal that, you know, that doesn't even talk about baggage handling systems, baggage claim, parking. There's just this was a plan to renovate the ticketing area, the 2 orange boxes, the orange box, this orange box being the baggage claim area, this orange box being the ticketing wing. There was a plan for some renovation, and some of that has happened, I guess, with the expansion and renovation of the ticketing wing. But it was fairly minor, and so just wanted to show you all that. I mentioned I wanted to help you all start thinking conceptually. So the reason I want to show you a couple of concept plans from other airports is just that, to get help you understand the level of detail that goes into master planning. So we always have to be careful to not cross that line into design. We're not. Someone mentioned in the public comments that the previous master plan did not have the word design. We will have the word design included, but again, this is a planning process to come up with a concept for the terminal. Whatever comes out of this master plan will be designed by an architecture firm, or airfield projects will be designed by an engineering firm that that is selected separately from the airport. So we take the planning to a concept level and we provide enough detail to do cost estimates and to figure out how to pay for the project and define the project, but we're not designing the project, if that makes sense. So just a couple other airports. I tried to pick three airports that we've worked at that are really busting at the seams and growing fast. This is Northwest Arkansas National Airport. This is the northwest corner of Arkansas. This airport is really growing fast. Before the pandemic, they were about to pass Little Rock as the busiest commercial airport in the state of Arkansas. You can see they have an existing concourse that comes off in kind of an L shape off the terminal. What I would point out on this concourse is just how narrow it is. It was essentially designed for regional jet aircraft, CRJ 200s, CRJ 700s, Embraer 175s, aircraft with seating capacities that max out at 75 passengers. Now, of those 11 gates, probably 8 of them are being served daily by narrow body aircraft. And so the spaces inside that concourse are just not big enough. So in addition to doing a plan for another concourse, and you can see how much wider this future plan concourse is, we also have a plan at this airport to eventually widen concourse A, the existing concourse. This airport also ran out of parking. You can't see the entire parking lot. It's within this big circle loop of the airport circulation road. But they hit about 1 million enplanements, annual enplanements, so 2 million annual passengers, and decided it was time to go vertical with parking. This parking deck number 1 has now been built. That's in place. And then they have a plan for another parking deck as well as a rental car parking deck to the west. But you can see, and this is kind of how the projects on the right of this plan were broken out by the planning term, short term, medium term, long term, and then the purple projects are basically outside of the planning period. So Harry mentioned 2042 is our planning horizon. This is a 20-year master plan. But we may potentially reserve space for projects that we don't anticipate needed in the first 20 years, but we still want to reserve space for them. Let's see, the second concept plan I wanted to show you is Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. This is an airport in the southeast, on the southeast side of Phoenix that is growing rapidly. They have a lot of service from low-cost carriers. This is a plan to relocate their terminal to the opposite side of the field. The current terminal has been expanded as much as it possibly can. There's no more room for growth. So in this master plan for Phoenix Mesa, we looked at both expansion alternatives of the current terminal as well as a brand new terminal on the other side. And you can see the concept here was kind of a curvilinear T structure. Neil, you probably have better terms for this than I do, but you can see the gating layout, the terminal building, the parking layout, the loop road. This was the master plan concept level. This concept has moved into what's called advanced planning. So they're doing kind of what I call preliminary design to define the project a little bit in more detail. They really do think that they're probably going to start designing and constructing this terminal in the next 5, 6, 7 years. And then the third airport concept that came out of a master plan is Reno Tahoe. So again, a fast growing airport. Reno's got 2 current concourses that you can kind of see on the aerial photo underneath here that had about 20 gates, 18 gates, and this is a plan to get them to 32 total gates. You can see with three concourses, the terminal in the middle. They do have a parking deck immediately in front of the terminal that needs to be expanded, and there's some plans for some rental car improvements at Reno. But hopefully these three concept plans kind of help you understand the level of detail, and we will have some drawings that are more detailed than this, that lay out the spaces, look at where concessions will go in these areas, and but eventually what gets put on the airport layout plan kind of looks like this. Questions about the concept level planning?
Just gonna ask when we get to ask questions. Are you familiar with Sarasota Airport? Done any work there at all?
We have not done work there, but I'm familiar with the airport, yes.
Okay, I don't know what its employment equivalence is, but it's seasonality and other aspects of customer experience or something I'm familiar with. This would ask that you take a look and see if it
Sure.
is truly comparable.
Yeah, appreciate that
Maybe an
suggestion.
example. And there are shortcomings there. It's not a perfect airport.
Do you see seasonality leveling off over the 20-year planning horizon? So we become less of a Starbucks problem and more of a closer to a flat line.
I think that would be ideal, yeah.
But do you think it would happen, or is it too early to tell?
Some of that seasonality we'll look at in our air service market study, and look at the potential for additional flights, basically in the summer months, but you know, that's a goal for most airports that have high seasonality, is to try to flatten that curve as much as they can and utilize the off season.
So are all three of these international in that they're able to have airlines that just don't do pre-clearance?
Phoenix is not, Northwest Arkansas is not. I do believe Reno Tahoe has a federal inspection facility. Yes. They do, yes.
So what in the plan are you envisioning, and how are you gonna change it so we don't have the same problem that we had with the last plan in terms of growth way out of the parameters of the last plan? In other words, how are you going to help us in this plan not outgrow it so fast that we have, you know, outgrown it in 15 years?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach where we want to look at the passenger demand analysis and really understand what's realistic, what's causing all this additional service by the airlines, why are they adding so many seats to the market? What's the potential for that to continue? You know, it's been double-digit growth for a number of years. Is that realistic to assume that continues into the planning period? But the other thing we'll do, Commissioner Miller, is we're gonna take our forecasts and we're gonna develop planning activity levels. So we're gonna try to tie improvements to employment levels as opposed to tying them into years. So instead of saying by 2030, you need to build these 4 projects, we're gonna say when the airport's currently at 3 million total passengers. When you get to 3.5 million, here's what we think you need. When you get to 4 million, here's what we think you need. And when you get to 5 million, here's what we think you need. So it gives the plan a little bit more shelf life, because you tie improvements to activity instead of tying improvements to a year.
And then identifying areas for future growth, right?
Absolutely, that reservation of space to so that the airport, so that the terminal building or facilities at the airport don't get kind of boxed in, if you will.
I have one other thing. Just
Go ahead.
you talked about
Sure.
peaking, and obviously bulge times are critical and probably the most important. But I'll also note from a customer experience perspective, low volume times can also be really bad customer experience times because of either under resourcing or decisions to close certain facilities at certain hours, et cetera, et cetera. So I would just urge you to, like, you know, it's the 80-20 rule, meaning it'd be 80% of the effort or 90 needs to go with the peaking, but to not overlook the non-peak hour issues. And I'm not sure how much of that really just falls to airport administration as opposed to master planning, but I want to throw it out there.
Great, thank you for that comment.
Recently, a purchase right near the airport happened and land went to some owner. Is it too early to have you identify opportunities for land that should be purchased as part of the master plan? Would that happen in the first part of the master planning process?
Yes, that is a consideration. Obviously, acquiring developed property for airport purposes is gonna be hard to do. But there are a couple, as you mentioned, a couple of parcels that are undeveloped adjacent to the airport that might make sense. And if it does, the master plan will look at that and if we can show the FAA that that land is needed for aviation purposes, for airport purposes, it makes it eligible for FAA participation in the funding of acquiring that land. So
Can that go 20 years plus, or what's the time frame for that?
it is, the FAA wants to see the land needed fairly soon. Years ago, they did a lot of, the airports identified land that they needed for 20 years, and then they identified land that wasn't needed for 20 years, but they still wanted to acquire it for land use compatibility to make sure that incompatible development didn't happen. The FAA called that land banking, and they've tried to move away from land banking so much. If they give you Palm Springs a grant to acquire property, they really want to see it developed in the, probably in the short term, if not the medium term.
5-10 years?
5-10 years, yeah. We'll talk a lot about it in this document, short term, medium term, long term, short term being 5 years, medium term being 6 to 10 years, and long term being 11 to 20.
I'm also going to assume then, because we did talk about this extensively in our September long range planning about advances in aeronautics and advances like helioports or helio landing strips and things of that nature. So I'm really hoping that you all are going to address that fully. There are some working models even since September when we talked about it, and Harry brought up some of these steps. That some airports are already building some of these things. And I think it'd be very worthwhile here in our airport to have those concepts, ideas thoroughly explored, because I think they're going to have a large impact on us as a community, the whole Coachella Valley as a community. And so I'm hoping that that's addressed as well in this plan.
Yes, that is a component. That's a scope item that we have to look at. It's really the electronic, they refer to them as eVTOL, electronic vertical takeoff aircraft, the electric version, making it much lowering the operating costs. And there's a lot of optimism. There's also a lot of skepticism that none of those aircraft are certified yet. There are a couple of companies that are hoping to be certified soon, but certified doesn't mean in production yet. So it does make it challenging to forecast that activity and how, when are they going to blacken the skies over Palm Springs, or are they going to blacken the skies over Palm Springs is a little bit crystal ball work. But from a planning standpoint, we are going to look at reservation of space for potential, whether it's landside and passenger facilities for those type of aircraft, or the vertiports are very similar to a heliport at an airport. You've all probably seen an H painted on an apron. You can have a heliport to an apron area, but it does have some setbacks and some constraints that we need to consider.
But remember, they said the same thing about Elon Musk 8 years ago.
Ryan, I'm gonna check real quick to see if anyone on Zoom, any of the commissioners.
Great.
Are there any airport commissioners that like to speak or ask any questions at this moment? Please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And the public cannot, no, sorry. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Is there any, also looking at the original design for expansion, Donald Wexler had originally designed this airport for future expansion to take into account that as an integration into the existing fiscal structure. In addition to it.
That's a great point. I would assume since it's a 1960s era terminal, it's probably not electronically available expansion plans, but We would love to see those plans and think about if that concept, whatever concept was developed in the original design still made sense. Yeah,
And just a quick touch, each wing was designed to be expanded out.
to keep going in the same
land side
layout.
wings
Yeah, yeah,
And the air side wings were designed.
yeah, that makes sense.
And the way it was cited originally was for future expansion.
We'll make sure you have that information. I do want to say on that point, you know, the airport's looked at this and there are some challenges with that, and that regulations have changed, aircraft types have changed, operations have changed, security. Not to say that it, you know, we can't continue along that road, but there have been some changes that kind of blockade that.
Which is a good segue to this map. So the FAA has some guidance documents on terminal planning. There's also some international terminal planning guidance. There's a program called the Airport Cooperative Research Program that puts out a terminal planning guidance document. All of those documents recommend that as planners start with identifying opportunities and constraints in the terminal area. So this is just a very simple map that identifies opportunities in green and constraints, potential constraints in red. And there's, you know, we could argue about some of these may be an opportunity and a constraint at the same time. But the idea is we tried to color the spaces and the areas that we think are expansion opportunities, and we've added there's some red and green arrows on this map. So to that comment on the baggage claim wing, as well as the ticketing wing, there is an opportunity to continue to expand in both directions. Some of the constraints related to systems that have changed, as Harry mentioned, obviously the baggage handling system takes up a lot more space than was contemplated in the original design. And that there may be changes coming soon during this planning process to that baggage handling system that we'll have to consider in the planning. But what I like about this map is it really kind of defines the platform, if you will, for terminal facilities at this airport. And it's kind of nice that you have this nice triangle shape amount of space that's set back far enough from the runways and the taxiways. There's a small parcel on here that's just behind this. Cursor's not working. Sorry for those of you in Zoom, but there's a small parcel here that airport staff is looking at repurposing. This is existing airport property on the other side of Alcilio Road that might be employee parking in the future. Just to free up space that is currently being occupied by terminal and airline employees. But there's, you know, we just added a few bullets of some of the opportunities, the potential for expanding this platform as much as we can. The airport has been collecting a customer facility charge, which is a charge that goes onto the rental cars and is intended to provide additional rental car facilities. They've been collecting that for a number of years, so there's quite a bit of money to be spent on rental car improvements. So that's an opportunity. There's the list of constraints is pretty long. But again, some of these, you could argue whether they're a constraint or an opportunity, but.
But is it par for the course when it comes to an airport of our size, based on our history, based on all those factors? This is not
Absolutely
crazy scary.
No.
You want a runway screaming.
No, not at
Yeah.
all. That every airport has these challenges. That is really what planning is for. There's no easy answer to the problems that face this airport. And that's why the FAA recommends you do planning. You look at multiple alternatives to solve the issues. And you come up with screening criteria that help you make a decision between those alternatives. Some of the screening criteria we may consider in this master plan, we probably will consider is the sustainability goals that the airport has. What alternatives would facilitate those sustainability goals versus what alternatives might potentially not facilitate those goals.
Coming back to just advanced air mobility and eVTOLs, is it Mead and Sut's position that this is going to happen? It's just a question of when it will happen and how it will happen vis-a-vis Palm Springs.
Yeah, the latter. It's going to happen. It's just the difficulty is forecasting how much. Great. Okay, I want to get to Katie's slides on public outreach because that is really important. But just before we do that, we looked at these in January. We break the planning process into these kind of 4 pillars. Pre-planning phase, investigation phase, solution phase, and then implementation phase. So in pre-planning, we've done most of the work. That was really scoping the project. So we've done most of column number 1. We're now about to kick off most of the tasks in column 2, the investigation stage. That's where the air service analysis takes place. That's where the forecasts take place. And then our terminal planners take those forecasts and those peak hour projections and turn them into passenger terminal square footage requirements. So how many square foot does each component of the terminal need to be, and how many processors do we need? So that's all the work in column 2. And column 3 is when we, the fun part, Harry likes to call it the fun part because we put colored pencils to paper and start coming up with alternatives and layouts. And as planners, we do draw with crayons and colored pencils and magic markers and not really sharpened pencils. Sharpened pencils is the designer stage. And then the last column is implementation. So breaking the concept into a list of projects, doing the financial implementation analysis, airport layout plan, and then eventually the CEQA environmental analysis.
Can you go back to the opportunity slide? Easier, sure, going further. I want to make a comment. So, Conrad as an opportunity, since I've been on the commission, it's kind of been a default, like this is like the Messiah coming. And I have a contrarian view on this, but I'm not an expert. But from a user experience perspective, I think the fact that the rental car facility is part of a one-stop experience in this airport for arrivals and departures is huge. And when we sort of just default into we're building the Conrack and it's going to be wherever it's going to be and whatever, we are changing the fundamental customer arrival and departure experience here. And so I would just urge that we look at scenarios before we just tell Gensler, go design that building over there. You started designing that building, that's the default, so go continue designing that building over there. I've been troubled by that for a long time. Every time I've experienced an airport, as you can tell, I think I travel a lot, where they have moved from it's right in the facility to it's a consolidated, the customer experience diminishes because it adds, you know, basically an hour inbound and outbound to your entire experience at that airport.
Yeah, understood. If you're taking shuttles to a offsite parking facility or a parking deck,
In 120-degree heat.
You're right.
So I mean, and Mr. Adams talked about expansion, one direction, possibility. I don't know sort of what that pushes that plot into, and that's what we're here for today. But that's I hope this is not our default, as Anslico design it.
Yeah, understood. The passenger experience on the rental car side is absolutely a planning consideration. And comparing it to the current situation, which is incredibly convenient to him.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, so we looked at the process chart, the schedule. The schedule is aggressive. It is a lot of work to do in 12 months. The reason I say 12 months is we're gonna try to do most of the planning work in the first 12 months. It's probably gonna be more realistically 12 to 18 months before we get to a full master plan concept, but then at that 18-month stage is when all of the CEQA analysis has to take place. So the CEQA analysis has some state regulated timeframes for public comment and response and those type of things. So we really, but Harry and his team have asked us to really focus on the terminal first. So most of the master plan resources are being dedicated to the terminal area initially. The hope is that by September timeframe, we get to a concept that we think makes sense for this airport on the terminal side, and then we can spend all of this time. And then at that point, we go do the rest of the master planning for the entire airport, and we spend that time refining the terminal concept. And then somewhere in the 12 to 18 month timeframe, we get to a draft master plan that can be, the city council has to basically bless starting the CEQA process. The master plan is in draft. It will not be in draft form in 18, or it will not be in final form in 18 months. It will be in draft form. It's not final and it's not a policy document until the city council accepts it, and they can't accept it until the CEQA analysis is finished. So the entire schedule is 30 months. The hope is that at the end of that 30 months is when it's ready for, the CEQA analysis is done, and it's ready for city council adoption.
And the terminal focus is to get to the gate challenge.
Not just the gate challenge, multiple challenges, we got a checkpoint, hold room capacity and concession.
At the bottom of this chart, we identify the working group meetings and the working papers. And again, those are draft chapters of the master plan that it's kind of a building block process. Each chapter builds on the previous chapter, if that makes sense. Okay, Katie, sorry it took so long to get to your slides, but
Not at all.
if you're still with us and willing to share a little bit about what we have scoped for public outreach on this master plan, that would be appreciated.
Thanks, Ryan. A quick mic check to make sure you can hear me clearly. I understand it was a little muggy before and I'm not at my best here. So just let me know if you need me to repeat anything or if you're having issues with my microphone.
Katie, do you have a headset? Because I think you're doing a speakerphone and it's really echoey and reverby.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Let me try changing my mic here. Did that work better for you?
Oh, much better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that, guys. As Ryan said, I'm Katie Franco, and I'm the owner and principal of Aviatrix Communications, and we are working with the Mead and Hunt team and the airport to establish some public outreach for the airport master planning process. We know this is really important for the airport and its airport commission to engage the community and to bring in some inclusive outreach efforts that attract a variety of diverse voices with that eye toward innovation and the new that Harry is focused on. But we wanted to deliver some specific stakeholder input that helps guide this master planning process. So over the course of that 30-month update, we and the Mead and Hunt team will coordinate with airport staff to manage the working groups and the public outreach, develop visuals that share the airport's vision, manage and host the public meetings, produce exhibits, press releases, a project website, and presentation materials. This strategic approach, we hope, will keep the community educated and participating in the airport master plan process. Essentially, at Aviatrix, we are serving as the pen and microphone for the airport as it provides information to the community, but also the pen and microphone to the community as it provides feedback to the airport and project staff. As Ryan mentioned, public participation is key, essential in this airport master planning process. So throughout the master plan process and the subsequent CEQA process, we'll be hosting several open houses, as well as inviting the public to participate in airport commission meetings like this. The public will be able to interact directly with the project staff at these open house milestones, including input on the terminal concepts, the full draft report and the refined terminal concept, and then during the CEQA environmental process. In addition to the public meetings and the commission meetings, we'll be asking for public feedback throughout the course of our communications across a variety of channels. So whether online, on paper, or through a commission comment, all feedback will be collected and considered part of the project record. Next slide. The central element for our outreach efforts will be our project website. Here, at any time, everyone has equal instant access to all of the airport master planning documents and working papers. They can submit comments for public record, review FAQs, and read blog updates as the project progresses. The site is independent from the passenger-facing airport site. Intentionally, this allows for clear communication about the specific airport master plan efforts. When the project is complete, the final documents will move to the airport's permanent website, and this site will sunset. But in the meantime, it provides direct, instant access to those seeking information about the master plan. We are in the final review process of that website right now, and we'll have it live this week. And we're looking forward to sort of setting the stage, getting ready to hurry up and wait a little bit as we kick off this project. And then the project team begins all the data collection and analyses that are going to really drive the terminal concepts and the rest of the master plan. Excuse me. The next slide, if you will. As this project kicks off, we'll continue sharing updates in a variety of channels. We'll use the project log to keep the community informed about the project progress, offering high-level takeaways as well as access to the working papers and draft documents that they're related to. We'll use the media and press to amplify our work and make sure that their audiences understand the progress we're making, and then share those media stories on the project-specific website as well. We'll use the airport social media channels to keep the airport master plan top of mind for the community, as well as using those channels to invite people to the public meetings and to direct them to specific elements of the master plan project website. We'll be keeping that website up to date with project information, as well as by using residents' questions in our project FAQs. So you'll be able to submit a comment on the website. But if you have a question, we'll respond to you directly and answer it. If this is something that we hear again, or we think this is a great topic that we haven't addressed specifically on the current FAQs, we'll continue to update those FAQs to make sure that as the project morphs and evolves, that we're continuing to keep the project, to keep the community informed about what is happening. Those are the updates for us. Again, it's going to be a series of meetings, a lot of information on that project website, and then regular communications across digital and media platforms. I'm happy to take any questions if you.
Katie, is the project website a subset of the website that we're bringing up shortly? So you get to the, or is it separate?
It is separate. The current website as it stands physically is not capable of hosting what we want it to. So we've spun up an independent site that we'll be able to link to from your current site, and then we'll be able to sunset completely once the project has been completed.
Thank you.
Do we have any commissioners on Zoom that would like to ask a question at this time?
And Daniel, are you the lead on this effort?
Will they be reporting through you for this effort?
Katie, ADH and Communications. Do you need the website or?
What staff member will Katie work through? on this?
Oh, me.
With you?
Daniel's already been very helpful in getting us access to the social channels as well as putting out the initial press release. And we'll continue to work hand in hand with him on those communications efforts. And then the full project team and the working group for the information that we provide to the community.
Other questions? What's next?
That was it. That is, yeah, obviously, we haven't done any work yet. This was intended to, overview the process for you. But we are going to, I'm gonna be working 10 hours a day, starting tomorrow. No, but, yeah, I appreciate you sharing, Katie. This really is intended to be a transparent process. We're not doing anything behind closed doors. The ultimate goal of the master plan is to provide some analysis that can be used to make informed decisions. So you all as decision makers, airport staff as decision makers, and ultimately the city council as decision makers have a lot of decisions to make about the future of this airport, and it's our job as the consultant team to give you the best information and the best analysis to make informed decisions.
Commissioner Harder?
Can the presentation be emailed to us, to the commissioners, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have that, and I'll send it out.
Thank you. What are your plans, either Harry or you, in terms of making sure the council is somewhat updated on this? I mean, I can't expect that after 30 months, we're gonna dump this 500-page document on the council's desk and say, read it. So is there plans, because I didn't see it in the scope here, about somehow connecting with the city council and keeping them up to date on what we're doing and what's happening?
Yeah, so there is. So usually, when I'm communicating with the council, I'm communicating through the city manager, and I meet pretty regularly. The city manager is going to be very involved in this process and where we are, mostly because there are a lot of decisions that need to be made in this process. There are also some natural kind of touch points where the council will need to be involved. Ryan mentioned the alternative space where we're starting to plan where buildings go, is the runway going to stay the same, things like that. That's an area where the council would need to be involved, and get the thumbs up or thumbs down on other seats. So there are going to be some touch points that happen over that process.
Okay, and are you also looking at government-owned properties, not just privately owned properties around the airport that might be possibly used for future facilities?
Right now, all options are on the table. It's kind of choose your own adventure.
So I don't think we should
Make sense,
automatically
yeah.
discount that. Because I think there may be opportunities where some agreements can be done with local governments, maybe not necessarily City Hall. I did bring that up. But the county might have some properties that might not be noted or underutilized or things of that nature.
So I mean, I think from my perspective, and I think Ryan probably shares the same view, we're not walking into this process with any preconceived ideas on what the airport will look like 20 years from now. The idea here is that we form those ideas throughout this process so that we can come up with something that works for most people in the community here.
Okay.
Does this conclude the presentation?
It does, yes.
Did you have additional, or Harry, did you have additional presentations to make?
I do not have additional presentations to make. We were allowing time for the commission to discuss, ask questions, and get this rolling.
Okay, since we have some extra time, we'd like to propose that we just do a round robin, since all the commissioners are not on the smaller group, the advisory group. To give the commissioners a chance to share what you think is most important for you, the communities you represent, you'd like to see addressed in this plan. So we can just get that dialogue out and give everybody a chance to talk about what they think is most important, or what you think is most important you'd like to see on this plan. So I can start. We talked a lot about this international terminal, or the opportunity to have the whole custom situation. And I think that's important. I think it's important. But I have been confused in different times about what that would really mean for this particular airport. So if we had the opportunity to have international flights come in here, realistically, what would that look like? So we know we have to have some sort of terminal for customs and all of that, and we seem to have space for that. But for flights from Mexico, I'm not sure how practical, which I think would be helpful. I'm not sure how practical that'd be. I mean, would we actually have flights coming from London, other international parts of the world, realistically? So I hope we find out, one, what is the feasibility? We all think it's feasible with this international terminal or this capability here. But what is the implication in terms of who would actually use it? We've heard rumors that Aer Lingus would love to fly from Shannon or Dublin to Palm Springs. We've heard these things. I don't know if it's true or not. Most of the commentary is really from Mexico. Most of the Canadian flights are pre-cleared in Canada already, with the exception of a few different cities, smaller cities in Canada, who perhaps would take advantage of this. But it sounds like a great idea. What airlines and what opportunities do we have in terms of different international cities who may take advantage of that? So I'd love to see that be explored while we make the assumptions. We'd like to have that capability forward.
A much more abbreviated version of the same topic. So international requirements are of interest with my company and Greater Palm Springs. We do know to be able to attract European travelers. We know that we would like to come here nonstop. What does that look like for us? So that certainly is a top priority.
As Commissioner Feldman touched upon customer experience, and what is the time when you're driving the terminal, looking at the signs, parking the car, to the time you're sitting at the gate ready to board? What is that timeline experience? And as we all know, it's very different at larger airports, and that's something we try to avoid at this airport. Given the compromise of expansion, distances, physical distances, how do we take that into account when doing all of these expansions, making it pedestrian friendly, shuttle friendly? What is involved? What are the compromises? That's a key component.
I think that as we take a look at the customer experience, we have to, as Chris said before, consider the experience of the neighborhoods and the people that will be supporting us by their experience as we magnify the airport. So I think that's extremely important to develop how the participation will be to reach out to neighborhoods, not just now as we're building them and putting the pieces together, but what will it look like afterwards to sustain the support to whether it's working with groups of neighborhoods or working with schools or whatever to just make the experience something that people may look forward to in our neighborhoods. And the noise.
So back to customer experience, I'll just add on, I'd like to see us do some customer intercepts on the inbound and the outbound side of things. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in my 3 years on this mission, we had COVID, of course. I don't think we've done that, have we?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so.
Excuse me, Dave, you said customer intercepts?
Yeah, meaning you stop people who are actively involved in the process of traveling either inbound or outbound. I've experienced this in many airports throughout the world. I would say some of the quality of those experiences is some high, but again,
Is that together? Feedback?
Yeah, they got feedback because they're experiencing it real time. And we can do all this stuff as experts, but the true customer day in, day out, what they're facing, seeing, hearing, I think would be valuable.
I agree with everything that's been said. Other two things I'd like to add is how are we going to make the airport sustainable, looking at alternative energy sources, circulation of passengers, and also I think if we could look at governance of this airport is getting to a point where it's much bigger than the city. And what is the most efficient way for this airport to be governed and managed? If we include that, I know it's a sensitive issue, and Palm Springs needs to be in control. Just looking at oversight and management, that process is with this plan and offer suggestions.
I agree with, again, most what everyone else said per se. However, I'm also really looking forward to seeing how we can make the airport future-proof in terms of making sure we have the right technologies, making sure we have the right mix of things. I mean, we are not like certain airports that have lots of land around us. We are really boxed in. And so I think we need to manage expectations that we're not going to be able to build 20, 30, 40 gates. We're just not, we just don't have that capability. So I'm looking for an intelligent plan, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That we all understand what our limitations are and maximize what we can in terms of acknowledging our limitations. I think the commissioners understand this. I'm not so sure the community understands this. And so I think it's really important that we move forward with that.
Yeah, and also echo all the comments that said, as a commissioner, I think Paramount with its successful experience. It's basically bursting at the seams, and we'll spend 2 more seasons bursting at the seams while we plan what to do about it. On a personal basis, I would love to see flights to Mexico. And I also would love to see the movement of TSA screening away from the dingy little box that it's in now and out of the historic Wexler terminal, so that Wexler could be restored to its former glory, that central part of the terminal. And so that people can experience their TSA screening in a little bit more humane conditions.
Echo everything that everybody said. We kind of set the nail on what David brought up. I love the fact that I can walk to my enterprise rental car in 30 seconds, drive away, or do a one-rent back from LAX, which I do a lot. So I love that experience. If there's a way to figure out how to do that, really welcome some thoughts that maybe the rental car companies have on new day. In 5 years, we're going to be doing it this way, kind of thing. That'd be great. I guess the other thing I would hit is just a broader land side issue. Understand and appreciate the support and focus on terminal side, but what happens in my observation over time is land side always gets forgotten. And we have, you probably saw when you walked in today, we're booked, right? And there's a lot of challenges with land side. So how could we, in our master plan, anticipate all the technologies and approaches to mobility and sustainability that might separate people from their bag sooner, might allow you to go through a TSA experience offsite. And now I go directly to a post security and I don't have to screen. So there's a whole bunch of things that we could start looking at. Would love to have land side looked at in detail.
You asked what would happen in our city. I agree with you. Customer service is very important. I don't want people coming to my city with an attitude because of what happened there. I want international travel. What we're beginning to do
would be conducive to international travel. All of our hotels, I provide them with information from the airport, which they feel is very important.
Thank you. The city of Indian Wells is really dependent on travel for its revenue for the city budget. And so as such, the customer experience and the travel experience really start at the airport. And so, as Jen mentioned, the city of Indian Wells really don't want people coming into the resort areas all upset, saying flights, delaying baggages, wasn't received, et cetera. So I think that's important, but when you're looking at the master plan, I think we should be looking not only at the volume of passengers that are coming through the airport, but also the growth of this valley. We are looking, if you drive around past couple of years, especially with COVID, you're seeing a lot of building going on. And so what was normal, what was previously empty land, homes are getting built. So the valley is seeing an influx of about 10,000 people every year. And so those people will be facilitating using the airport much more so. So that's going to add to the growth, and I think that should be taken into account, projections that we have because of that. And so what that, I believe what that's going to do is the seasonality is going to start to adjust. We're not going to be getting that curve between more straight line because of that. More people are living here, because of the telecommuting that has really enveloped so many other industries over the past years because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
People are working out of the home. I work out of the home. I used to have to go down to downtown LA. Not anymore.
And to that point, I was really critical of the previous master plan, but in 2015, nothing was foreseen. There was no pandemic that was foreseen where people were going to shift to remote work. So again, things change fast in this industry, and it has impacts on airports.
So, but I think that should be taken into account as well, but also with regard to, you mentioned governance, the city of Indian Wells, again, because we're so dependent on travel for revenue. I think that the other 9 cities outside of Palm Springs should always be included in any governance model with regard to the airports. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. So I would look for high-speed direct access from Indio and Coachella.
We'll call it one.
Exactly. We'll call it Elon. No, but I would certainly within the constraints and confines of what we look at in and around the airport property, look at public-private opportunities. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a financial plan or a business plan, but I think when you start taking a look at technology and maybe even an airport city kind of concept, mapped onto a smaller airport, there might be some very interesting opportunities.
Chairman Donna, did you want to make comments before we go?
Do it out here. I'm going to throw it to anybody up here have comments, other.
Commissioner Michaelis, would you like to unmute yourself and make any comments?
Yeah, I don't have any additional comments. I certainly concur with everything that's been said by the other commissioners. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Salama, did you have any comments to make?
Yes, I do agree with the rest of the commissioners, but I haven't heard much about the tribal government, the Agua Nation involved in this process of the general planning, with them being such an important part of this this landscape and the culture of where the airport sits. So hopefully the consultant team does work, reach out to the Agua Nation.
You're good. So I have a couple more comments. I'm going to throw it off top for his final comments. Is evidenced by talking to some of the folks in the public. This design issue, the Wexler design, the whole thing, it used to be a big issue. And so, how do we embrace the design or the existing design in any expansion that we do? And Harry makes a good point that lots of things have changed since this thing was first designed. However, as evidenced by the success of modernism in the last 2 weeks, it still is a huge factor for us and a huge differentiator. So, you made it clear that it wasn't part of the deal, and I understand why, but I think it's important to the community. And so somehow between the Gensler folks and everything else, I think we need to be able to at least discuss that or pay that off because it's such an important piece to us. And I know you weren't suggesting that we would ignore it, but yes, it's becoming more and more of an issue here that everything we do has to have a sense of design. I agree with David on the car rental piece. For those of you who are new commissioners, there was a study done where we asked the car rental folks and everybody else what the requirements were. And as I recall, the feedback in this 2019 was, well, to satisfy everybody's request, we would need a 6-story building. Right, and that just wasn't going to happen. So it raised this issue of, for convenience, do we keep the car pickup and drop off here, and then do all the administrative offices go someplace else? I think if we were forced to make that choice, building on David and others' comments here, we want to keep it as convenient as possible. Now, those of you car rental folks, the idea of admin someplace offsite or on the other side of the airport, I know it's a hassle. But the concepts, even looking at the shuttle buses from this remote parking lot, it's a nightmare. And it may be our only thing short of putting in the tram from Indio and have it go through the airport. But if we keep it central, I think that should be a priority. What happens to the short-term monies that have been given to us? Like recently, just yesterday, Harry announced that we got, what, 5.8 million?
5.7.
5.7 million to redo the baggage claim area. Can we take advantage of those funds now and start doing things, or do we have to wait? Because any changes we make now, and I know the terminal is our priority, the sooner the better. So how do we handle money that we have access to now, and how does that work? I think there also needs to be a sensitivity to where we are in the terms of the concessions discussion. We're working with Herities and the Marshall Group on the final design of these concessions. How does that affect the long-term plan? And should we be thinking about anything else before they start to break ground and build some of these improvements that should start sometime this summer? So there's that. The other thing I would say is, what's the impact of the thermal airport? There's a lot of buzz around investments in thermal, and this all private go to thermal. A lot of that's happening private now, but does any commercial airlines that wind up at thermal? And does that become a competing airport for us? And what's the impact of that if in fact thermal and the other East Valley communities make a bigger investment in that airport? It would be interesting to know just how we think about thermal and how we react, or what impact that would have on our planet. And maybe you guys would have a better sense of that, or something we should listen to in terms of what's happening or not happening with the thermal airport. So those are some other things that I thought we should think about. Up top.
Thank you, everyone, and echo everyone's comment. My number one priority is being from the hospitality business, international traveler, having customs, immigration should be a very high priority. Because keep in mind, tourism is the number one most dominant industry. And that should be our focus. We call Palm Springs International Airport, and guess what? We have neither customs nor immigration facilities. And lastly, knowing that we are in a seasonal market and summers are so brutal, and as David said, customer experience, somehow create shade structure both internally and externally, because at times in the summers, it could take 40, 45, 50 minutes before the customer that arrived at 110, 120 degrees has to wait, and that doesn't start the trip on the right track. And thank you all for your comments.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing on international? I think the elephant that's not in the room is that LAX is the largest departure airport for international travel in the region. And ironically, for all intents and purposes, we're cut off from LAX here at this airport. And I know that's broadly the responsibility of our tourism institutions and all of that, but I just wonder whether there's a creative solution of some sort for bridging that very wide divide between Los Angeles, where international travelers can come in large numbers, and a large number of domestic. If you look on social media, just talk to people, tons of people just default to flying to LAX, because that's what they know. It's like, oh, LAX, Palm Springs. Sure, but my biggest concern is on this international piece and bringing international visitors from LAX to Palm Springs. I don't know if there's a partnership with private aviation that we can do if the airlines are not interested in that route, or what it is we can do to make that route more attractive. But to me, over the course of time, we have never dealt with why this airport has this huge chasm between us here and the largest gateway to the world, which is about 98 miles from here. Maybe it's unsolvable. I don't know.
Thank you, everyone.
Ready to adjourn the meeting? Chairman Dodd, do you want to?
This time I would like to, obviously, the motion to adjourn this meeting. Bye.
Here.
But I don't